Welcome to the Randy Gravitt Leadership Podcast, where we help you lead the hardest person you will ever lead, yourself. Here's your host, someone who believes leadership begins at home, Randy Gravitt.
Welcome to our show for this week, and I'm so excited to have my friend, my co-author, and my mentor, Dan Webster, with me. This is going to be great. We've had a fun day training today, and now we get a chance to shoot some content here to help leaders who are trying to lead themselves. I always say the hardest person you'll lead is yourself, and I have an expert here today to help you on that journey. He certainly has helped me. So, Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks,
buddy.
Randy. It's good to be with you.
It's going to be great. So I want to start out, and I would love to hear a little bit of your story. You've done so many cool things, author, speaker, leader. You have this company called Authentic Leadership, and this week we're talking about authenticity. And I'd really just love for you to share a little bit of your backstory and give us some of that. And then I got some questions I think will be helpful to people.
You bet.
So,
well,
California boy.
I did. I grew up in Southern California, and so many nuances to the story. You know, my dad was a great athlete, and I went out for every team in high school as a sophomore and didn't make a single athletic team. And went into high school at 5'5", 185 pounds, and thankfully I had a algebra teacher who recruited me to be the boys' sophomore basketball manager. And so I would practice with the team, and the very last practice of the year, one of the truly defining moments in my life was the sophomore team would practice outside at our high school in Orange County. And the JV and varsity would use the gym. And after that last practice, he says, "Webster, bag up the balls and then come over here. There's something I want to say to you." So I bag up the balls. All the guys had taken off. And he looks at me and he says, two things. Number one, thanks for helping me. I'm going to give you extra credit in algebra because he was my algebra teacher, so that was money. But he said, more importantly, you're a better athlete than any kid on this team. There's a varsity basketball player inside of you. And I looked at him like, why are you being so mean? When's the punchline going to come?
You're 5'5".
I'm 5'5", 185. And he says, no, he said, I didn't see in tryouts what I have seen during the year, because when we've had a kid who's been sick or injured and you filled in just so we can have 5-on-5 practice, I've watched you. He said, I want to encourage you to go out for basketball next year. Well, that was a profound turning point in my life, that here's a guy who saw something in me that no one had articulated. So between my sophomore year and my junior year in high school, you know, it was a perfect time because Mother Nature hits me with her wand, and I grow up, and I went out for basketball and was co-captain of the team as a junior, and we played for a state championship as a senior in high school. And that was very significant for me. And one of the other defining moments for me was when we won the semifinal game to qualify to play in the Los Angeles Sports Arena for a state championship. I'm the first guy out of the locker room. I'm sitting on the bleachers with my little gym bag waiting for all my friends, all my fellow teammates to come out. And I'm watching the janitor sweep up the fallen banners on the floor. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you know, I'm going to go back to the school with my 12 teammates, and there'll be 1,000, 1,500 people waiting for us, you know, over the playoffs, crowded gathered. And the bus will pull around behind, and the door will open, and the Red Sea will part, and we'll all walk, and they'll all be clapping for us. It'll be a really cool moment. And I'm thinking, as I sit on the bleachers there at Fullerton Junior College, I'm going to go in, put my gym bag down. I'm going to go out and take the hand of my 5'8", blonde-haired, green-eyed girlfriend that I only wished I could have had a girlfriend like her as a sophomore. Now I'm a senior, and I have
now
all
you're
the
tall.
Yeah. Now I'm cool, and I'm going to get into my tricked-out green Volkswagen Bug, you know, and I'm going to drive to her house and.
This was in the 20th century.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was in the 20th century. And I'm going to kiss her, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to prepare for a state championship game. And I'm sitting there as a senior in high school, and I'm imagining I should be the happiest kid on the face of the planet. And people would say I was having a classic existential crisis because I was realizing that I had all the right friends. I had athletic prowess. I had the right girlfriend. I had a cool car. And my life was full, but something was out of whack inside of me.
Something was missing.
Something was missing. And I understand now, being more mature and further up the road, that, you know, my faith belief is that only the love of God can fill that most inner part of who I am. which I discovered, 3 months later after we lost that game in the sports arena.
Yeah.
But so that was interesting. And I had always assumed that I would go into medicine. I had an aspiration to be a doctor. So I go to junior college and I'm playing basketball there and taking, chemistry classes and stuff like that. And between my freshman and sophomore year in college, I went back and I visited 3 of the guys I played high school basketball with in one day. And 2 of them were strung out on drugs. And one of them had a kid and could care less about his kid or his girlfriend. And I can remember driving away from those 3 conversations thinking, why didn't someone do something to help guys like me in high school understand the love of God? Because I don't remember one authentic Christian kid on my high school campus. There wasn't an FCA, there wasn't a Youth for Christ, there wasn't a Young Life. And so while I'm pondering that, why doesn't someone do something like that? I felt a sense of calling. I felt like God said, yeah, why doesn't someone do something like that? And that was the moment that God ruined my life.
You're not going to be a doctor.
I'm not going to be a doctor.
You're going to go help young people.
So I ended up going to Biola University, played basketball there, and got hired to do student ministry out of college. And I spent, about, it would have been 6 years doing student ministry in Southern California, and built a student ministry at about 850 kids, and then was invited to be part of a large church back in the Chicagoland area, and inherited a student ministry of about 450 students and built it to about 1,800 with the help of an amazing group of professionals and a couple hundred volunteers. So, for 20 years, I was crystal clear concerning how we define, when we talk about leader development, you tend to use the metaphor of an iceberg because 10% is above, 90% is below. I use the metaphor of a sailboat, but it's the same principle. And the reason I like the metaphor of the sailboat is because it illustrates the 2, what I call the lifelong works of leader development.
Yeah, unpack that for us.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, when you look at a sailboat setting on the water, there's an above the waterline aspect to it. You can see the mast, the riggings, the grinders, the sail, and then beneath the waterline is the bottom of the boat. There's almost always a keel arm coming off the bottom of a sailboat with a heavy ballast bulb to keep it perpendicular in the water. So just the metaphor of a sailboat represents the 2 works that I think every life, leaders definitely should be about this, but above the waterline, there is this external kind of seen part to our life development. It's what I call the work of the work. And there's a work that has each person's name on it. It's like a personalized thing, and that hopefully grows out of your passions, your interests, your talents. And it's up to us, it's up to every human being to try to go through the process of discerning, who am I? What energizes me? What am I interested in? And then we need to do the work of discovering and developing ourselves so that our talent can touch the planet in a meaningful way.
And that's concerning our work.
That's concerning our work above the waterline.
So talk about, you tell the story about, I never heard of this guy, but you tell the story about Michael Plant, who was a solo circumnavigator. He was a sailboat racer, basically, and he raced these boats. And tell a little bit of that story and connect that to, there's also this other work, the work of the heart that you talk about. Share some of that.
Yeah, Michael Plant was a world-famous solo circumnavigator. In the fall of 1992, he had constructed a 60-foot state-of-the-art single-hulled racing sailboat that he christened Coyote. And so he shows out of New York Harbor, and he's on his way to sail to France to participate in what's called the Vendée Globe Challenge. That is a race when about 17 world-class sailors in their individual sailboats chase each other all the way around the globe. Wow. Michael Plant held the U.S. record. I think he had, in 126 days, he had sailed around the globe. Wow. So he's sailing his Coyote, and France, the sailors of France, of Europe, had pretty much dominated this race for a long time. And so he had reconfigured and tricked out a state-of-the-art sailboat. And it was, the race was closer than all of the technology of the boat allowed him to refine. So he's sailing across, and on day 5, they lose contact with Plant. Even though he was fiercely independent, once every 24 hours he would call in. And check in. But on day 5, the ground station receives a 3-beep burp from what's called an emergency indicated beacon radio. It's, if you hit a button on this radio. It shoots a signal into a satellite, and it gives you exact location on the globe.
Okay.
Which sailboats that sail across the ocean have. So, but the problem is that the ground stations didn't take it seriously because Plant was in such a hurry to get his sailboat to France, he didn't register it. So there was a long period of time when eventually his wife, Plant's wife, and others convinced the United States we should get him because the people in France.
We got to check on him.
Yeah, the people in France said he should already be here. So the United States and Canada send out search planes. They can't find him. They ask all the ships and the freighters to keep an eye out if by chance they could see that coyote or Plant bobbing around in his emergency raft. And I can't remember what day it was, but it was quite a while after that there is a freighter 450 miles from the Azores Islands that looks out and they see the coyote floating keel up in the water.
Oh, wow.
Now the coyote had an 11-foot keel arm shooting off the bottom of the boat with an 8,000-pound ballast ball that looked like a torpedo.
Wow.
And the reason why the sailboat was floating upside down is that the ballast ball had been snapped off.
Wow.
So if you remove 8,000 pounds from beneath the waterline of a sailboat, that sailboat becomes susceptible to go down not in just a major North Atlantic storm. And they still don't know what happened. Did he hit underwater sewage? Did he clip a whale? Was it a storm that revealed a defect in the workmanship? This high carbon fiber. But the bottom line is that they never found his body. He lost his life. So the reason why I tell that story is that it was weight beneath the waterline that caused him to lose his life. It wasn't the integrity of the sail or the grinders or any of the things up top. So
it was basically the ball broke off.
The ball broke off, yeah. And so the reason why I like that is that the vast majorities of problems that I bump into in leadership, and you do too, they're not above the waterline skill, strategy issues. Almost all of them are endemic into the lives of the leaders, and they're beneath the waterline realities. They're character issues.
They didn't forget how to lead a meeting, solve a problem, cast a vision, build a team.
No.
It's that character piece.
Yeah, it is the character piece.
The self-leadership piece.
That's exactly right. So above the waterline is work of the work, beneath the waterline is work of the heart. And that is the quality of person that we are. It has to do with our integrity, our character as a person, our humility, our chronic positive attentiveness to inner growth and to receptivity, our sense of humility. Humility always fills space. Humility always creates space. Pride fills space. And so for a leader to manage their life beneath the waterline is to stay in that perpetual state of mindset of growth and of humility so that they can listen to their own lives, they can listen to the voice of people who love them, they can listen to the voice of God, and they can continue to mature. Because, I don't know how many times, who you are is how you lead. And for leaders, many times, Marcus Aurelius said, what gets in the way is the way. And so whatever that challenge is in leader development, whether it's above or below, and so often it's below, dealing with that issue where you're bumping into life, that's the place at which your growth happens. And leaders can develop all sorts of resistances to think that I have to grow at that point instead of everybody else around me has to grow at that point. But that's a whole different thing. So for me, after 20 years, I was as good as anyone in the country at doing student ministry.
Yeah, you'd built the two biggest student ministries really at that point in the history of the American church.
And I loved it.
And you were great at it. And people were coming to you and asking for all the stuff. And
they were.
And then here you are.
Well, so I'm leading, for 20 years, leading those gave me life.
Yeah.
At the 20-year mark, I walk into the auditorium and there's so much energy with 1,500, 1,800 kids in there.
Yeah.
And for a long time, that energy fed me. Now I walk into the auditorium and I wake up to the fact that I don't even want to be there.
It's draining you at that point.
I realized that leading this is now sucking the life out of me instead of giving me life. And I just turned 40, and I didn't have the maturity to know what had happened.
What was going on? Yeah.
I didn't know. Was this some kind of breakup in my makeup? Was this a childhood wound surfacing? Had the ministry outgrown my capacity to lead? Was this, if I had greater experience and wisdom, could I have predicted that this kind of thing happens to most leaders somewhere around midlife, and it opens them to a different area of maturation than just hammering away above the waterline, getting skilled in fundamentals of leadership do. And so that that experience there kicked me into about an 18-month midlife dip where I had to rethink my experience. It was not a crisis of faith. My inner confusion about fulfillment of vocation, I didn't stop believing in God or trusting the Lord. I didn't hate kids.
Yeah.
I just knew that if something doesn't shift inside of me, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
And that was very frightening for me.
And so you left, and you.
I did. I transitioned out.
That was part of, and then you end up a couple years later. You end up starting this deal, Authentic Leadership, which you still lead to this day, 25 years later.
That's right.
And so
I had an interim there, kind of this 2-year interim where, I asked the church that I was serving if they would give me a 3-month sabbatical, which they did. I had 10 years in there, and so I sat down with a psychologist, and I did just a healthy introspection of my family of origin, my relationship with my mom and my dad, and the influences of my family of origin and how they affected how I went about work and how I thought about my life, and had some minor breakthroughs there. I read all sorts of stuff about midlife crisis and what people go through. I asked people to pray for me. I talked to older people. And so during that 2-year kind of interim, the church that I was at gave me a role that didn't have anything to do with youth ministry that I was able to fulfill. And then at the end of that year, I knew that I had to transition out of that church to really get clear on what I should do next. And so I ended up going to Michigan. 5 couples had invited my wife and I and another good friend to come up and help them plant a church. So I helped them get a church up and going, and I got buoyant again in my spirit, and I got clear on what kind of my next calling in life was, and that was to birth Authentic Leadership.
So you use the word buoyant there, and you have influenced me, and I use this word all the time now, thanks to you. But it is the picture of a buoy on the ocean or on a lake, and there's a wake all the time, and sometimes it'll go under. But because that thing is tethered, and because it is buoyant, it stays afloat. And so getting to that point where you rediscovered your passion, not that what you were doing, there's you remember the book Halftime where he talks about moving from success to significance. It wasn't that you can't be successful while you're being significant. It's not that you weren't being significant when you were successful, ultra successful, and the big things that you've grown. But there's just something about living into what you're supposed to be doing that just kind of brought the life back into you, right?
It was a very surprising shift for me because when you think, my inkling is that the first 35 or 40 years of our life, our primary focus is above the waterline, is trying to get clear on what is the work, what are the core fundamentals of the vocation that I have, how do I get good at them and master them and move myself ahead vocationally, and the ministry or the company or whatever.
The team, whatever you're building.
Whatever you're trying to build, at that point. And so for the first 20 years, I loved it. I was energized by the work. I kept my head down and I got good at that. And then I had this horrible awakening that, oh my gosh, increasing the size of the organization that I'm leading, the ministry I'm leading, just increases the volume of the sucking sound. Because I felt like there was this vacuum hose plugged into my soul, and now it was sucking the life out of me. So what happened, I don't know if it's classic or not, but I went from being really interested in organizational development and how to grow stuff above the waterline. I lost my enthusiasm for that, and I swung completely the pendulum out to, oh my gosh, how do you manage your life in such a way to sustain making your contribution? And so I became, and the second half of my life, my new calling, the first half was about building a ministry that was relevant to high school students and to introduce the love of God to them. The second half of my life is not about organizational growth and development, but it's about leader growth and development. I'm kind of embarrassed that I think almost entirely about how leaders form, how they grow, how they develop, how to help them sort out the messiness of midlife, how do they make transition. And so that's what I do now. And I would never have seen it back then. I thought I was going to be a world changer in student ministry. Southern California, hundreds of kids, Midwest, thousands of kids. Eventually I'll be part of the change, and it wasn't that. God kind of knocked me on my back, and I spent 18 months thinking, I got to figure out how to manage my own life, to keep my own heart alive, and then I need to help high potential leaders figure out how not to blow themselves up and how to anticipate some of these things that happen at midlife, to not sink them, but to be a door that opens them to an area of growth that can make them far more successful in the long run than just their leadership skills.
So leaders, all kind of leaders that listen, they get into this grind, they're going for a while, and it's like it wears you down. It's hard. I mean, leadership's hard. We say all the time, and yet because you were able to navigate all that and actually put language around that, authentic leadership, and kind of created this process, and you got connected to the life planning with Tom Patterson, some of those kind of things. I show up on your doorstep about 15 years ago, and I'm kind of upside down. And this is one of the things you do. You help leaders who are struggling to know, am I doing the right thing? Am I thinking the right way? Holistically about their life. Talk a little bit about the blueprint process and
Sure.
the life planning process.
Yeah.
Because you have executives, you have team leaders, coaches, high performance leaders from all over the world show up on your doorstep like I did. And I mean, hundreds of people now have shown up and spent 2 or 3 days there in Holland, Michigan with you. And
it's
describe
been crazy.
that process a little bit. And
I have to be, Tom Patterson, who died at age 94 this last year, was an American treasure. He created the Patterson process that he did with over 4,000 companies, a brilliant strategic planning process, and then he birthed the life planning process, where he took some of the fundamental technology of strategic planning and he applied it to an individual life. Before I started Authentic Leadership in 1995, a friend said, that's a big risk to start your own little nonprofit. You should probably go to the mountain and meet with Yoda. And I said, well, what mountain and who's Yoda? And he said, Big Bear, California, and Tom Patterson. So I went and I spent a day and a half with Tom. I didn't know a lot about him, but he's one of the 2 sages I've been able to be with. Was just brilliant. And the technology...
I believe, not to interrupt, but I believe Peter Drucker said that Tom was the greatest
strategic thinker that's ever been born.
That's ever been born. Yeah. I mean, this guy is the guy
Yeah.
when he takes all this systems process stuff and he applies it to a human life and helps us think through that. And so
he and Peter Drucker were very close friends,
Yeah.
and Tom applied more of Drucker's theory than any other person on the planet. I've often thought about Tom and Peter sitting in a McDonald's and when they're in their 70s and going in and just having no idea who these boys were.
Yeah, that's great.
They were just monsters. So the day and a half I spent with Tom was transformational because he walked me through his ability to engender trust and to create an environment, a safe environment. And then the process, the technology that he walked me through helped me get clear that authentic leadership was the second half of my life. And then 5 months later, he calls me and he said, hey, I just had lunch with Peter Drucker, and Peter said to me, Tom, you're not getting any younger. You better get your disciples in line. And so he said, I'd like to invite you and 4 other people to come to my place in Palm Springs, and I want to hand off the technology of the life. I want to spend 5 days explaining the life plan process. Are you interested? Well, sure, I was interested. So I went back and was fortunate to be part of the original 5 that Tom spent a week, and he talked us through the whole thinking process, because the process... Tom was a genius on so many levels, but he created a technology that dovetails the way the brain processes information to break through. And so he created this technology in a day and a half process where you walk a person through their life to help them gain perspective on their life.
Yeah.
And then once you have perspective to discern what you should do in the future, it writes itself. And that's what happened for me. And so I went and did that, and since 95, I've done about 200 of these things. They're just one of the things that I do on a micro level.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that happened for me, it's much like you just described, was when you spend this day and a half and you guide us through that process, it literally, for me, it felt like the answers just kind of, once you have perspective, the answers just become really clear, real quick.
That's right.
Is that fair to say?
That's exactly right. He would say, when we were in his home in Palm Springs, he said, if you walk outside my house and you just look down the road, you can't see the San Andreas Fault in the Palm Springs Valley. Yeah. But if you get in that tram and you go up through 10 or 12 thermal layers, you stand at the top of that mountain, you look down over the Palm Springs Valley, you can see the San Andreas Fault. Once you see the fault, wisdom would say, don't buy property or build a house there.
Not real smart.
So, but he said the thing is that you have perspective because you see over the valley floor of your life, and now you see where not to build and where to build. And so that's a good picture of the life planning process. Is we kind of get in the tram and we go up and we look over the valley floor of your life, and hopefully we create, we get enough data and enough intuition and enough listening throughout the process, and people of faith try to listen to what heaven is saying to them too during that time, and then we write a plan that over the next 6 months I help, or over the next 8 years I help people walk into.
Yeah, really. And whether a person is a person of faith or not, I mean, they've sat at your house, they've had a chance to literally create a blueprint about their life and the life they're trying to build, and it's just been such a gift.
It's a righteous process.
So many. And I would say this: if there's anybody you're upside down in your leadership, you feel like you're just not sure about what's next, we'll give them your contact info, but they need to call you because this is what you do. I mean,
it's one of the things
you do. You do a lot, but one of the things you do is you spend time one-on-one with executives and leaders, nonprofit leaders, whatever.
It's been quite I mean, college presidents, psychiatrists, a Guatemalan Jew who ran a company, and then everybody in between.
Yeah, all up and down. That's good.
And it's fascinating.
So one of the things that you're passionate about, I'm passionate about, it's something that's important to us, is helping the next generation. And we had an opportunity a few years ago to write a book together, Finding Your Way, which, our thought process was to try to help them have a compass to navigate some of this stuff before they get upside down. I mean, it's like if you can start earlier, it would be better. I mean, it's language that we wish we had. Talk a little bit about the Finding Your Way process, and just some of how content creation has been one of the things that you've been passionate about, but how you believe it helps others. I mean, we've had colleges use this, high schools use this, all kind of people, but talk a little bit about Finding Your Way.
Well, working with kids, for being the father of 3 grown sons and working with students for 20 years and mentoring hundreds of young leaders, I had a genuine curiosity and interest in trying to help young people sort out who they are, what are they interested in, and what would it look like for them to live into who God has made them to be. So that was just like a second language for me. And then raising my 3 sons who are so incredibly different, and each of them are in vocations that reflect who they are, and helping them discover the truth of who they are was a great grace and an incredible challenge. So I spent some time reflecting on, what would a process look like? If I was trying to step back and just whiteboard, what was true of the relationships I built with young leaders that I mentored, or in my own sons, to help them find their way into who they are? Not to live some socially prescribed role that I felt they should be, but to truly discover themselves and to live into who they are. When I stepped back and I thought about that, I realized, you know what? There is a process that you can lead people through. If a person will take time to look back, to look in, to look up, and to look out, and then follow some exercises around there, you can narrow the field down. You can narrow who I am. And so Finding Your Way, it really is, it's kind of above the waterline. It's kind of one of those first things is how do I do the work of discovering who I am, and then how do I grow into that so that I can make a contribution and be fulfilled? So the story that we wrote really took those 4 core principles of look back, look in, look up, look out, and we created a story around a college senior who needs help finding his way because he's lost. And we dovetailed that, and then in the book too, there in the back of the book is a journal that a person who might want to walk through that process can.
Through that, yeah.
And we had a ball writing it, and it's been fun talking about it.
It was so much fun, yeah. That's great. It was great, and there's as you said, there's just it really does just it lays out this simple plan that I am passionate about every young person having access to this, because I think so many people they don't know what they want to do or what they should do. And there really are clues from who they were as a kid. You know, if they were organized as an 8-year-old, they're probably going to be pretty organized as an adult. Or if they were a people person as a 10-year-old, they're probably going to be and so there's a lot of things there.
There are principles under each one of those four.
Yeah, and all that stuff. It's so good. So, yeah, shout out to Finding Your Way. Get a copy. We would love to get that in your hands.
Well, and we've had schools use it. We've had colleges use it.
Yeah.
We've had Chick-fil-A operators buy it for all the graduates.
Team, yeah.
And
we've had colleges take all their freshman class through, and high schools and all kind of people.
Yeah, there's an athletic director.
Programs, exactly.
Yeah, so we wish every kid in the country could
experience that. So if you
experience
know a young person that you believe in, this is a great little resource that you can get them. I think you can get it at findingyourway.us. So
and if you
we'll put that link on
you think of the power of partnering, a young person partnering with an adult that really authentically cares and has watched this kid. And
there's just nothing. And I think back to you didn't say this, and I want you to talk about this for a second. But you didn't say this, but when you were 5'5", you've told me before you were in remedial PE. I don't even know what that is. You were in remedial PE.
Adaptive PE.
Adaptive PE.
Let's get the right word.
Sorry. Yeah. So and because some leader, your teacher, he spoke life into you. It brought you alive. And so I think sometimes we underestimate. It's great to lead ourselves, but one of the things we need to do is make sure when we're leading ourselves that we are creating awareness about the people around us that we have the opportunity to speak life into. And one of the things you say, you've shared the story about one of your kids, but there's the same was true for you, and same was true for me early on. But you use this phrase a lot. It's too early to tell, and I think what you meant by that, or when you said that, was that there's these stories about who you are in 8th grade is not necessarily who you're going to be at 38 or whatever, And so I think there's tremendous opportunity for us to see the potential in others. Will you speak about that for a second?
You bet. Absolutely, I will. There is when you're in grade school, if you're in a reasonably healthy environment, you're probably more authentic to who you are than any other time. Then you get into junior high, oh my gosh, your body's changing.
Yeah.
Then you get into high school, you spend half your time figuring out how should I behave to be cool.
Yeah.
And then you grow up a little bit. Well, my middle son was born ADHD and he has dyslexia. And so, school was really hard for him. There was a woman who got next to him in middle school who taught him strategies to compensate for his challenge, his disability. And I can remember when he was in 7th and 8th grade being a heavy middle school kid and sitting on his bed and him crying and basically saying, why has God made me this way? And I can remember feeling as a parent, most of us are as parents walking through a cloud trying to figure out what the next right thing is, like we're all Solomon. But I looked at him and I said, Landon, I said, buddy, a couple things you need to know right now is that I don't think God made a mistake in making you how he is, but it's too early to tell. We don't have enough data. You don't have enough years.
You're in 7th grade. I mean.
Yeah, and I said, maybe the most important thing you need to hear from me is I'm not going anywhere. I am going to be with you to help you sort yourself out. Well, he ended up, his mama, Judy, my wife, his mother read him all of high school. And he graduated with a 3.7 GPA as a scholar athlete. He went to college and he got a doctorate in chiropractic. He's got a functional movement practice, and he is a genius in a specific area of functional movement, the body. But don't ask him to read a book and give you a 10-page written. It's not going to happen. And so
But he'll heal you for hurting.
Navigating the sense of poor self-esteem comparatively to his other friends who were further along developmentally and could actually read and understand and write, and to help him navigate and to help him over time see he has a unique genius. He sees things outside from a different perspective, and his dyslexia can be, there can be real advantage to his disadvantage when you grow up a little bit. Navigating as a parent, that kind of challenge in him took a tremendous amount of energy. But to see him today, having, he's got 3 other doctors working under him. He works on pro athletes, pro golfers, all sorts of people, and he is unbelievably gifted at what he does. he is a finding your way kid, but it took an adult who really had the patience and the time to stay with him to help him walk through this process, to help him find his way. And my other two boys are completely different.
Yeah, that's so good. Let's go back. I want to kind of wrap this up, and I think you've agreed to be with us for a few more minutes, because I want to talk about, on our next episode, I want to talk about some of the things we can do to finish well, to stay engaged. I want to refer to Unstuck a little bit, but I want to wrap up this first conversation with this last question. So let's go back to this idea of being authentic leaders, and let's again talk about below the waterline. So the ball breaks off, the sailboat flips upside down. It's like if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't lead ourselves well, we literally lose all credibility. We sink our leadership. Is that fair to say? And can you give us a thought on one thing we can do? Like if you had to say, what's one thing we can do to make sure that we don't forfeit what's going on at the character level, the heart level, the underneath the surface, however you want to say that. Like encourage us, give us a pearl here before you go.
Oh, there's no hope.
We're in trouble.
I think a major first step forward is to have a worldview or some kind of construct in your mind to help you understand what your growth journey is going to look like. And so I think if the first step is you can realize there is a work that has my name on it, I need to be about doing that. So I got to figure out, what my job is and get better there. And a more important part in the iceberg illustration or metaphor, 90% of who I am is beneath the waterline of my character. And so for me to take a step to realize I need to pay as much attention to what's going on in my life beneath the waterline, the person I'm becoming, as I do in how I'm achieving in my work. I think for us to take that step and realize, okay, I'm shifting the bend of my life from 90% my work above to 50-50. And I'm going to learn to listen to my life and to pay attention and to do things that will enable me to be a balanced, mature person. I think if we can do that, just to have that mindset to say, okay, now I'm there. Now what are some of the things I can do to really enhance who I am beneath the waterline? We could talk about that more.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, thank you for the gift of this. It's just it's a dream to have you here. So grateful, and so grateful for your contribution in my life personally.
You're
and
a treasure. Your friendship is a treasure.
Seriously, so good. Thank you for being with us. For those of you who are listening for the first time, I encourage you to download and not download, but to subscribe to our podcast. And if you have friends who are trying to lead themselves or people on your team, you're trying to help them get better, I encourage you to share this with them, have them subscribe. It helps us grow what we're doing. Give us a like or a thumbs up. And we'll be back with you next week, a week from now. On Monday, we'll be back with another episode, but next Friday, you'll have another opportunity to hear from Dan. He's going to share with us some things that we can do to create traction in our leadership and some practices to make sure we do keep ourselves buoyant in some of that. So until next time, never forget, leadership begins at home.
Thanks for listening to the Randy Gravitt Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, we ask you to leave a review if you haven't already, and subscribe so you'll be alerted when we post new content. We also encourage you to share a link with your friends. Tune in Friday for another episode with a special guest leader. Now, go lead yourself first. Remember, leadership begins at home.